stream has started again.
Well, I see the two up.
Well, we started on it this time, so hello.
Excellent. Hey, hello. That works
Are we
a
working?
lot better.
Do I dare risk starting a recording? Probably not.
Um, you know, that's probably up to you.
I can probably
We will
download
have a
it.
VOD,
Yeah,
so
I can download it. It just would have saved me from having to download it. And with a
yeah,
24-hour video, it probably would be a little beefy.
yeah. We got looks like we got a few people in chat, so that's always good.
Yeah, I see Dina, I see Zach, I see Batu.
I see myself, but that's to be expected. So, well, since we're killing a bit of time before we launch into stuff, what do you want? What do you want to talk about? How was your day?
Uh, didn't get into a whole bunch of anything. Let's see, I've been watching a lot of movies lately.
Oh yeah, anything good? I saw. I know you watched Mad World the other day.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's a classic. I loved that when I was a kid.
Yeah, I can let's see, what have I watched recently? I've got a list of it here somewhere.
Well, I spent the entire day building desks, uh, but now I'm very happy with my desk. I can actually this might be funny. I want to take a look, watch my feed.
Mm.
There, it should have moved up. Wow, look at that. And now it moves down.
Neat.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's there we go. Yeah, it's one of those amazing sit stand desks that I'm going to be planting my ass in it pretty much 24/7. So it's a nice option. Uh,
Yeah. That that's not going to be problems for our health at all.
no.
At least you've got the standing desk. So,
Yeah, someone got their book.
thank you, Dina. Wait, you got it? As in
Physical is shipping already?
as
Because it sounds to me like the launch party should have started hours ago.
wait, so what I'm hearing, Dina, is that they decided for my book to release it at midnight my time instead of their time.
I'm gonna see. Uh,
That's amazing. You know, I checked this like 8 times.
Actually, it says it will be released on December 18th. Right now? Right now?
Is it going to be your time? Is it actually doing it midnight, whatever your time is?
No, it is actually out, and I can.
Amazing. But it still says
uh,
pre-ordered it for me.
well, I bought it.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you didn't have to buy
correct.
your own novel. But I mean, hey, late stage capitalism, you fucking might.
Mm.
You might have to.
Oh,
But
I've bought
yeah.
several copies of my own novel already.
That's awesome. Well, what are we counting down to now then?
Uh, well, I can just update it to say that it's released.
Well, there you go.
I'll just change the
Hey,
countdown timer.
it's released. Parentheses probably. We're gonna do an any percent speed run of reading your novel.
Mm.
Um,
We could.
yeah. Do the what's that typesetting technique that just came out where you only bold the important syllable in any word, so it makes it incredibly easy to skim and read really quickly.
Well, now I updated it to midnight, but it doesn't want to do midnight. It thinks midnight is part of tonight.
Oh,
There. Now it says buy now.
perfect.
Amazing.
Excellent. And where would one buy it now, good sir?
Well, on Amazon, of course.
Oh,
If you
oh,
go to my
yes.
website, magitism.com, you will, you know what? You would be able to pre-order there, but let's just fuck it, do it live,
Hell
and
yeah.
push out the new version of the site.
That's excellent.
I was going to do this in 3 hours. Might as well do it now.
Well, hey, at least you don't have to be nervous about it being released on time, because Amazon decided to do what they do.
I checked this so many times, and everybody said that it was going to be midnight in Pacific time.
Interesting. See, I would have expected midnight Eastern because when I live in Portland, so I am about as far away from you as I can get.
Mhm.
And whenever media releases in the United States, it releases midnight Eastern. So I always get it the day before I go to bed, which is very fun when I have like an anticipated video game to play
Mhm.
or a movie dropping on streaming and whatnot. I can always check it out before I head to bed.
All right, let's upload some changed files.
The release stream begins. Should probably announce in the Discord.
You are not wrong.
I would do it. However, I have no permissions to post.
Yes. I'm gonna drop an update. At here, it would seem that Amazon lied to me in
Never.
a dozen locations, and the ebook is out right now. Boom.
Got him. I will add a reaction of angry ping. And then I'll take angry ping away and add a reaction of hyperclap because I am happy. Excellent.
Is this
So,
the current stage of the of society that we're now announcing our emotes and
oh, I'm not sure it's for society. It's for the people watching on Twitch at home to make sure that we are in fact using Discord correctly because we're we're older and older people, they need help sometimes with technology.
there we go. Site is completely up. We got we've got links now at magitism.com to the hardcover, the paperback, and the ebook. Go buy them now.
Buy a copy for yourself, a copy for me, a copy for Will. Will definitely needs a copy.
Yeah.
For all of your pets, friends, family, friends, enemies, especially your enemies. Your enemies could also honestly use like 50 copies each. That just about covers it, I'd say.
Sure. Yeah, every one of
Maybe.
you that's listening now, go buy that many copies.
Okay, and also a pair of copies for the minor deity of your choice.
Yes. And do make sure that you send them directly to those churches. I'm sure they'll really appreciate the book.
Yeah. So we're just kind of shooting the shit for a while, but what kind of madness do we have in store for this our 24-hour launch stream? Your 24-hour launch stream. I'm just here.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. Yeah, so what we will be getting into over the course of this stream will be some talking about the book, some readings from the book, several chapters, as many as my voice can handle, and lots of game playing, and maybe some Q&A if there's enough people with questions.
Having a little bit of apparently one of your friends has socks older than either of us.
Yeah, oh yeah, she definitely does.
Okay. Those, like I said, those must be incredible socks, perhaps handmade or made in a time when items manufactured were built to last and not be a disposable commodity.
Yeah. I mean,
but I'm in my 40s, so that's a profession. That is a properly ancient sock.
Yeah,
I will say.
Well, and she knows I'm roughly the same age as you, so
awesome.
She knows. I believe her that she's got 40-plus-year-old socks.
Excellent.
What she needs to do is go find them and take pictures, and then we can show them during the stream later. How does that sound to you?
That I think that sounds like a great idea. We get enough viewers, I might strap on the Virtual Boy over there.
Oh, if only we could get video out.
Yeah, that it's not modded for that. You can mod them for that.
Mm-hmm.
But mine actually needs to go in for a minor repair. The left eye piece, the screen has the ribbon cable. There's a glue on the inside of a Virtual Boy. There's a ribbon cable for each display that is held on with an adhesive, and for whatever reason, the left eyepiece in almost any Virtual Boy that hasn't been touched since they released, it just separates slightly. So the temperature of your room can affect whether the contact is touching or not.
Mm.
And then you play it for 5 minutes and realize that you're going to get motion sick, and then you throw it back on a shelf.
Well, I know that you get motion sick in VR, so I'm a little surprised that you can even handle the Virtual Boy.
It's 2D. My issue with VR is actually the presence issue. It's the desyncing between the display and the motion. I know that they have gotten the response time down to very negligible levels in modern VR, but at this point, it's fine. The floating hands bug me anyway, so I'm not missing much.
I think it'll eventually get there to the point where that'll be solved even for you.
Yeah, I check it every couple of years. The last time I tried was actually a PSVR, which is older at this point, but I was able to actually play for like a half hour before I got sick. But if you want a fun story later, maybe later, I can tell you about the time I got to play Eve Valkyrie with CCP before the Oculus was even publicly released. And yeah, things happened.
Depending on how the stream goes, I might dig out my Oculus Dev Kit 1.
Oh yeah, it was a pre-Dev Kit 1. uh, uh, unit.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Stories of a washed up game journalist.
Mm. So yeah, I guess the book's out, and we were gonna do like a whole interview leading up to it to get people excited for when it came out, but I guess we'll do that after now. I guess we have to do that after now.
Well, yeah, because it already happened. We haven't started the interview.
Yeah, that's how time works.
Yes, from our perspective, anyway.
Yes.
I always love chatting about science with you because I have a very, I have like the base level knowledge that anybody should, and then I have what I was interested in and what I dig into. And you've always, I've known you for what, about 15 years now?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Maybe
Uh,
slightly more than that. Yeah.
yeah. It's about '07 or '08, so somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
But I think the fun thing is you have one of the most curious minds out of anybody I know, in that you will you need the knowledge, so you go and you find it. And
I was going to say,
I've
it's
always
like
found
you were saying that you just have the extra knowledge that you were curious about. And I'm exactly the same way. I'm just curious about everything.
yeah. I tend to check myself from going into I would say kind of like an obsessive mode. I tend to dig in quite a bit, and I've got family to take care of, so it sometimes that gets me into trouble.
Yeah.
But gosh, I'd say like the easiest softball question I can lob at you to start here is, and we talked about this earlier off stream, but why did you actually decide to write a novel?
Well, as you know, and people who already know me know, I've been writing my whole life. Uh, I don't. I've never. The kind of writing that I do is usually short stories or microfiction.
Hmm.
Um, and that's mostly been because I just haven't had, I've had a full-time job for all the time when I, I felt confident enough in my writing to consider publishing. Um, but really, the difference maker uh, for me in the last few years is like everyone else, I ended up with all this extra time uh, when the pandemic started, where I was suddenly working from home. I didn't have a commute anymore,
Hmm.
and things had changed at work that made this possible. The policies at work, and it just it just I had the idea, and so I went for it, and yeah.
Yeah, it's everyone. I my We were talking earlier about random hobbies one's picked up in COVID. For instance, I got into knife making,
Hmm.
and I build mechanical keyboards now because I'm a filthy degenerate and I like spending too much money. Um, but I've known you for a long time as someone who is deep into like tabletop role playing and world building in general. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit how you've drawn on like your DMing experience and things like that in channeling that same kind of energy into actually writing long form fiction that is not swayed by interactivity from players.
Sure. uh Really, to be honest, there's like several core uh, similarities between DMing and writing a novel. Like you pointed out, there's the world building side of it, where
Mm-hmm.
um, all these years of being a DM has enabled me to put together, a cohesive world that is going to feel real.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of DMing and a lot of novel writing is being circumspect about where you stop and
Mm-hmm.
let something be let something feel bigger than what is on the page or what is in somebody's
Mm-hmm.
mind in theater of the mind, right? You
Yeah.
you can let the the reader or the role player uh, experience something that's more visceral by leaving stuff off of the page, because somebody's mind is going to take them in a direction that's more personal for those
Mm-hmm.
portions of the experience. But I think the biggest thing that I gained from all those years of DMing was being able to hold in my head uh, the possibilities of the future for either a campaign or the novel, which means that I have an outline that I work to. Whether it's a game or a novel. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
for a game, obviously, there's a lot more possible outcomes. Uh, but what a lot of authors have to do is they have to write to they have to be very careful when they're writing, because they'll create loose ends that they're not going to be able to, like, they don't have a solution for.
Yep.
So when they come back and do editing, they end up with a lot of structural changes that have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to take I basically treated my own characters like they were the players in one of my games, and just used the same skills that I use to bring everybody back onto the same page in a game,
Mm-hmm.
to bring all of the characters back around. And there's a certain amount of subtlety that you develop as a dungeon master for making that feel natural, that directly translates to novel writing.
So yeah, I would. We actually got a question from Clavica in the chat. I don't know your friend's name, so I'm going to call them by their Twitch usernames. Uh, but they ask, is there a potential for a tabletop campaign for Magitism eventually?
I think there's definitely room for like a campaign setting using the Captinians. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have one in the works yet. In that I'm planning any, but there certainly is the potential.
So I guess I would springboard off of the dungeon mastering. When you're dungeon mastering, you tend to you've done all of your world building, and when you're setting your campaign, you tend to have the kind of, at least when I do it. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I tend to write, here's my outline, and here's like a rough flow chart of player makes good decision, or player acts like I know this player would, and then scoot it around. But when you're DMing, you have a little bit of authorial intent in that you created the campaign and the setting and you're guiding the players through it, but you eventually have to let go and let the players inhabit it. And that becomes that becomes the interplay between dungeon master and player. When you're writing a work of fiction where you are the sole author, do you find have you found that you are more nervous or less nervous about the way your story is received when you can't edit in real time like you could in say a campaign setting?
Sure. Uh, I would say more nervous in general, uh, but there
Mm-hmm.
are controls as an author that can give you some of the same sort of feedback along the way. There's beta readership, and before
Mm-hmm.
that, alpha readers, where you just get people to read it and get the reactions from it, and that's similar to, but maybe not quite as good as the direct feedback you get during a game. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, with a D&D game, you're getting that feedback at
in the
every
moment.
moment, right?
Yeah.
Which gives you the ability to really, when something's not working, you can fix it on the fly or in the very next game, and it won't have as big of an impact potentially on the whole story that going down the wrong rabbit hole would with a novel. So you, you could get into a trap where you have to rewrite the whole novel.
Sure.
So definitely more nervous about that.
So pivot a little bit. As someone who's known you for a long time and kind of knows the types of media you consume and the things you like to do, when I'm reading the book, I see a lot of what I know of you in it. Like I hear, in some character, in one specific character we talked about, I hear your voice quite a bit. Not in maybe the way that they think, but the way they express themselves is very Will to me.
Sure.
When you are creating a character, where do you draw inspiration from when you're finding a character's voice?
So I think that I'm a little different than most authors when it comes to building out characters. A lot of authors will describe keeping like a set of notes, maybe putting together a theme board with a bunch of images that they feel are representative of the character, or they'll write down characteristics of the character and a history and their backstory. Because of my role-playing background, I leave a lot of that loose in my NPCs so that I can update them on the fly to tie them back into the story in a way that oftentimes feels like prophetic when I'm playing, when I'm dungeon mastering. And 20 years of doing that has made it so that I can get a character pretty quickly, even with next to no ephemera associated with them.
Yeah.
But one thing I do is I find some kind of photo reference for the character so that I can have like an image of them to work off of. I have a lot of trouble actually pulling images up in my head. Maybe that's aphantasia. Maybe it's somewhere along that spectrum. So having that photo reference helps me a lot. And then as for coming up with the characterizations, figuring out who these characters are, I figure out what they need to do in the story, and I figure out what that means that their background should be. And then from what their background should be, I come up with what that means that they should be like as a person.
Yeah.
So the character that you're talking about, Ziz, they're who they needed to be in the story was necessitated that I go and make sure that their background fit that. So I knew they needed to be involved in the early stages of dealing with the situation in the book. So it made sense to give them a profession that made sense to be there, which you can see how that would cascade back into informing what their history is, and then their history informs who they become as a person.
Yeah, I find as a player when I'm playing a tabletop RPG, I tend to create my characters very loosely, similar to how you were describing. I create, like, here's a series of hooks. I also like coming up with a set of triggers. So, like, if X happens, then Y will be how my character responds, and I find that's my way of making it like an interesting character. But you brought up aphantasia, or your inability to visualize faces internally. And I recall on the Discord, you actually spent a bit of time with an AI tool that is good at generating like photos of humans.
Sure.
And could you maybe describe a little about how that helped you see these characters more clearly in your mind?
Yeah. The AI generation I did for those character portraits, um, that was actually after the book was almost essentially written. But they're very similar to the photos that I was using. I don't share the photos because I don't own them. Um,
Sure.
but they are very similar. Um, so it's actually more like the opposite, right?
Okay.
I knew what the characters were going to be doing in the story. I knew who they were. I knew everything about them at that point. So it was easier to take what I knew about them and use those as the prompts for the AI generation. So it's kind of the
Hmm.
other direction.
Oh, well, that's actually unexpected. I thought you were I thought when you were posting those, you're like, oh yeah, this is really getting me into a rhythm. Um, and I guess pivoting directly to the book, you have written a first contact story,
Yes.
but the and I've known you for a long time, and the one of the things I've known about you is you are very skeptical. And so when you told me that you're writing a story that includes magic, my eyebrow perked. I'm like, really? That that doesn't sound like Will. And of course, in reading the novel, uh, you have taken some steps to quantify such a thing. And I guess I'm wondering, your love of hard sci-fi. Like when we speak about books, and we haven't in quite a while, other than Magitism, but you were very into Heinlein and authors of that era, and that's that very hard um, uh, sci-fi of a certain period.
Yep.
And thus far, Magitism follows in the very I'd say it's more like a casually hard sci-fi. It's very like it's not as dense as some of those other novels would be. But um, what would you say really drove you to that specific, like the actual force you're describing
Sure.
in the novel?
Well, I can get into a some of that. Uh,
We don't
I,
want to spoil much, but
well, I definitely don't want to spoil this book, but I also don't want to spoil the sequels. So there are. I'm going to be a little bit coy with my language here, but this essentially came about from me thinking along the lines of there are a lot of people in the world that do believe in supernatural things. They be that magic or gods or what have you. And I see as a skeptic a lot of problems with those the way that people think about magic and the idea of the supernatural. So the sort of kernel that Magitism grew out of was asking myself the question, well, what if all these things really were real? What would that mean that the world has to be like for those to be true?
mm-hmm.
Um, and as a simple example, if you look at something like, this hasn't come up in the book, but something like ghosts, how could ghosts be a thing when every time we try to go investigate them, you can't see them, we don't find them, science is unable to investigate them? Why? What is the reason behind that if they did exist?
and then you'd have something like, say, a Pepper's Ghost illusion that can create exactly what people are describing in almost the conditions people are describing, and yet we can quantify such a thing uh, via the scientific method.
Yes. And then the deeper question of if this is something that's happening out in the universe, why is it so uncommon here, and why have we been able to advance beyond it? Which
Mm-hmm.
is where the whole setup of the beginning of the book comes in.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I would actually like to ask you a little bit about how you came up with the design for Burning Flames, who is kind of the central character that the events of this book surround. And noticing the lovely illustrated illustration from Jeff D over your left shoulder.
Yes, right here. Um, so let me grab it. We can this actually, you know what? I can do one better. There's the splash screen. We got the picture right there. Don't fall on
And that when you showed me this, that really excited me because I know Jeff D from his like TSR work and whatnot. So that was very cool.
Yes.
Look at that little bean. He's so cute.
Yes.
They're so cute. Pardon me, I misgendered our hero.
Mm. It's okay. Good. What you got to do is just correct yourself and move on.
Yes.
Yeah, burning flames and the Captinians in general, their designs are, they come out of my desire to keep the alien life actually alien, and not go down the Star Trek route of every alien being a human with some sort of funny prosthetic on their face, or even some of the like in film, we try to make the aliens have some sort of recognizable human appearance in some
Mm-hmm.
degree, because there's this persistent belief that people will not be able to sympathize or empathize with an alien if it's too alien, that
Mm-hmm.
that you are not going to be able to accept them as a person. And thematically, it was important for me to make sure that the aliens are truly alien, exactly so I can make them people to the reader.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some surprising emotional connections between some of the characters in the first third of the book that I thought they're quite lovely. Um, but I guess the thing that sticks out to me honestly is the like trying to visualize what these creatures are, and try and avoid knowing about things like your interest in, say, the game of life and things like that when we're describing the way the aliens become the different types of aliens that they are.
Sure.
But there's almost like there's a theme I find of like iteration, at least with the way the aliens speak of how their technology, I will use the word technology, and that is incorrect, but for the sake of a discussion, the way the aliens come about their ability to travel space is discovered through in a very slow set of iterations.
Yes.
And so that, to me, that is a theme that kind of runs through the entire novel. There are some humans that have a similar thing going on. There's the aliens, and then there's the team of humans that work around them. And uh, is that would that theme would I be correct in assuming that theme is actually important to understanding the story?
I think so. Yes.
Hmm.
My it's also relevant to my own understanding of progress in general, or what we
Hmm.
might call progress. Uh, in some regard, what we consider progress is uh, we view it as like an objective direction, like
Hmm.
things are going to move along this spectrum, climb this evolutionary ladder towards more and more perfect forms. When I think that that's just the direction we're headed in, and it's a judgment call about whether or not that is a positive or a negative, and it's going to be on a case by case basis. It's not necessarily all good or all bad. What
Hmm.
what we consider progress. But in this case, and to get in a little deeper, um, the Captinians, the aliens, they don't have technology like humans have technology. You alluded to that.
Hmm.
They their technology, if we're going to call it that, is uh, based on selective breeding of animals, and um, there's a necessarily iterative element to the progress of selective breeding, um, where you are progressively moving along a direction that you have set for yourself to achieve. And in the
Hmm.
case of the shipskates, the 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 creature crafts that the Captinians use to travel to the stars, there's an iteration that took place. There's a series of we can call them gates that needed to be passed through before each of the stages along to the ship's gates were were enabled. In other words,
Hmm.
they didn't start with the idea that we want to sail across the stars. They started with the idea that our cities are spread apart, and it would be really nice if we could just ship things through the sky instead of along the ground. And so they
Hmm.
worked on animals that could fly and could push themselves across from city to city. And then they realized that their home planet has a thin atmosphere, so space is not terribly hostile to them. They realized that they could just keep going up higher and higher, and that led them to traveling to the other planets within their own system. And from there, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to traveling the stars, especially
Hmm.
when you live as long as some of the Captinians can.
I was one of the things about the Captinians that I found really interesting, um, that is not plot relevant, but I thought this was fascinating. Was I don't remember the word for the way when the moon orbits, the same face is always facing Earth. There's a word for that that is escaping me, but their home planet.
Tidally
Uh,
locked.
what's that?
Tidally locked.
Tidally locked. Yeah. Okay. So they are also tidally locked. So the cities that the Captinians have built are at the edges of where the shadow ring around the circumference of their planet would be.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really interesting idea because I hadn't come across anyone that had done that in a novel before, where it made any relevant sense to anything, but it ended up establishing the hierarchy of creatures that the Captinians have access to, which I thought was that was a very intriguing proposition. Like how would in an essentially in eternal twilight, how would a society thrive?
Yeah.
Um,
It was a problem I had to solve because when researching uh, likely star systems that these aliens would be coming from, uh, this star system, it's a real star system. It's called Captain B. Um, well, the star system is Captain. The planet is B.
Mhm.
And it may there's some it may or may not the planet may or may not actually be there. There's some question right now in uh, in the scientific literature about whether or not it's really there. But if it is there, it's orbiting the star very close, and it's very large, uh, and so it's very likely that it would be tidally locked. So it was sort of out of necessity that
Mhm.
that I had to come up with a way that they would organize their society, and also how their their physiology would work. And earlier you asked, like, how did I come up with the actual physical structures uh, for burning flames? And really, it's all informed by that research. Is they're going to be on a planet that is probably very one side of it's probably very radioactive from being faced very close
Mhm.
to a star, and it having almost no atmosphere. So that means it's bathed in radiation, and so on.
And the fact that burning flames, for instance, can't see visible light the same way that a human eye would,
Yeah.
kind of jives with, well, if we're only living where the brightest point of light can hit us, having eyes that react to the visual spectrum is probably a huge disadvantage. Um,
Or at least not an advantage.
mhm.
Being able to see heat, infrared, is much more advantageous.
Mhm.
And they also see ultraviolet, which is beneficial for seeing elements of radiation. Um, there's a lot of stuff that fluoresces in that spectrum when
Yeah.
exposed to radiation.
Yeah, and the way that the aliens actually communicate with one another through their various means of, we could call it telepathy, but the between those kinds of proximity links and the what you've called the slap talk, um, I find when you're coming up with the slap talk side of that, is that because of the way the differentiation that you describe between the creatures allows them to keep communicating, or is there something else about that made it necessary?
We'll say there's something in their history uh, that elevated them from what they were to the more, we'll say, magically aware beings that they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And um, we're not going to get into what that was, but suffice to say that in their earliest iterations, millions of years ago, the slap talk developed as an early form of communication. They don't have vocal cords. They don't make
Mm-hmm.
sounds. They can hear. It's still useful to hear, but they can't. They don't really have a way to make sounds other than to slap against their own bodies. And so somewhere between, you see in movies when, like, soldiers will be using hand signals to
Yeah.
that works over really short uh, direct line of sight um, situations, and they're able to gesture in similar ways. But over a longer distance, but not really long distance, the slap talk was useful for being able to have a level of communication um, that would work when you weren't able to see each other directly. And then as they continued to evolve, they eventually were able to connect to each other more deeply than that, as you said, in a
Mm-hmm.
essentially telepathic link.
Yeah. Let me think. Another big running theme throughout the entire novel is a very frank and honest discussion of queerness,
Yeah.
I find. Um, Obviously, that's an incredibly important topic to me. But what was your line of, was it you had a character that you came up with that necessitated this, or was this something you wanted to explore through prose regardless?
It really, there are, I think, three sources of this theme in the text. One is that I wanted to write. It's relevant now. It's an important
Hmm.
discussion that unfortunately is happening yet again. Uh, I'd thought that we had gotten past some of this, but I guess not. Um, so it felt important to me to speak to it. Uh,
Hmm.
but also there are elements of the story that paralleled this, um, the sort of the I already had in Burning Flames a progression in the story that paralleled nicely with
Hmm.
coming out, um, the general story of coming out as queer, um,
Yeah.
and the difficulties of doing that. And I also see things that aren't being talked about as much or as frankly,
Hmm.
uh, that I wanted to address in a form that has the space to do it justice.
Hmm.
Where if I like, a tweet isn't enough, a Facebook post isn't enough, a blog post isn't enough to really do uh, these kinds of feelings justice, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and where the story goes, I think it becomes apparent why it's important from a plot perspective. But
Yeah.
we won't spoil any of that.
Yeah, I would say, going along with how relevant that discussion is today, there are a few elements of the plot that definitely feel like the experience that we all shared over the past few years, still being relevant in the prose of the novel, um, along with some, let's say, factions that exist in the world. um,
Indeed.
when taking when writing something like this, I find, at least when I write, there's like a very careful line you have to tread when you're saying, okay, everyone is going to understand this piece because we've all shared it, but you're including it to serve the plot. And how did you balance writing about current events without technically writing about current events and not letting it feel like you threw it in just to give a sense of place?
Uh, I think I think the mistake that a lot of authors make is trying to, like, reacting to the possibility of it being too on the nose to the point of overreacting. And so what I did is I basically just put it out of my mind and said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to treat this just like it is what it is, like it exists inside of a vacuum, like I don't have an opinion about it,
Mm-hmm.
and just explore it as if it's just explore it as if it was any other topic,
Right.
which uh, we're being vague about what we're talking about, but what we're talking about is a faction within the book that uh, is derived from the QAnon conspiracy,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a difficult thing to step into and treat with any level of respect. But that's ultimately what I had to do. I had to step into those headspaces to be able to write from characters' perspectives that are part of this movement. Um,
Yeah, I mean, even even with what our likely opinions on such a thing are, and because we don't want to derail this discussion for hours, but I find like even doing the mental exercise of forcing yourself to empathize with a person who thinks like that is useful for writing character, but it's also useful for having an understanding of what's happening in the world these
Yeah.
days. Um, so I found I it would I would say when the first time I came across like those people in the book, I'm like, oh, okay, let's see where this goes, and it hasn't gone where I thought it was going to go. So I feel like you've still managed to reference something and create something wholly new, which I appreciate because to talk a little bit about me and mine for a while, my wife and I are role players in, we play Dungeons and Dragons, but we did a lot of role playing in online video games, and there are an awful lot of people publishing stories about their characters in the framework of the universe that we chose to create those characters in, and the disparity of people's understanding of how to avoid self-inserts and how to correctly have a relationship to established lore without turning the lore on its head to fit your narrative is it's interesting. And so I'm very used to reading other people's like bad fan fiction about a universe that I know very well, and I'm sure spending as much time doing tabletop stuff as you did, you have no shortage of stories about that sort of you just shake your head when someone talks about their character.
Mm-hmm.
But there's I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. There's a way that people write when they graduate out of their fan fiction.
Yes.
And they start writing something like it's almost imperceptible unless you followed someone's writing style as they go on. And I guess if I'm going to divine a question out of this is, how did you feel? Maybe it didn't happen with Magitism, maybe it's happened before. When did you feel like you actually crossed that line where you said, when I write something, it's actually going to feel like a novel thing rather than yep, this sure is League of Legends fan fiction or,
Sure.
insert property of your choice.
I don't think that I ever went through a proper fan fiction phase.
Mm-hmm.
My family has always prided originality, and so even from a very young age, it was important to me to be original, even above being good. And I think a lot of my earlier writing, even stuff that you read, I think suffered from a desire to be new and different and interesting, above even being high quality. And you, especially if you dig up any of my old art on DeviantArt or something, you'll see immediately that what I'm trying to do is be different, even if it's awful, even if it's ugly, even if it doesn't make any sense. And so if anything, I think I've matured into accepting that everything is a remix and not bucking against a trend just because it's a trend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I find art is intensely personal. If your art is bad in other people's eyes, it might be great in other people. What's great to someone is shit to someone else, right? So uh I am also like, I'm a visual artist on in my weird broad array of skills, and I'm never happy with what I create, but I am happy when I create. Like the end result is is kind of meaningless to me because I'm not releasing a product. But the end result is I put time into this, I put skill into this. I'm happy. Pardon me. I'm happy with what I've created. Um, so I guess I'll ask the question: are you happy with what you've created?
I'm very happy with where I ended up with Magitism.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't I don't often, maybe ever, finish personal projects. You've known me for forever, and I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever actually finished anything. Um, but that's not usually my goal. Usually, my goal is to learn something, and I think upon reflection, what's really different about Magitism versus all of those other projects is that I'm not trying to learn something uh, about production with Magitism. It's a work whose intention was to to say something,
Mm-hmm.
to actually be a product, to be a thing, to be a work of art that people could get something from, as opposed to most of the other things that I've done, which have just been, I really like X. I want to try to make an X and see if I can learn how to do it.
Excellent. I am typing something in chat. Please give me a moment. um, Here's a nice softball question for you.
Sure.
We've explored some headier topics. What would you say? Who would you say your favorite character to write for was?
There, I can't pick between really two of them. One I didn't get to write nearly enough, and that's a character named Frankie,
Mm-hmm.
which you meet towards the end of the first half of the book. Writing him was just a blast. The way that he thinks, the way that he reacts to the world,
Mm-hmm.
and then also there's a character even further along named LN, who is actually based on somebody I know personally that I work with, um, and is becoming kind of an author meme because people keep inserting Ellen into their books as LN. So I'm contributing to that. Maybe we can continue this meme, and it can become a thing. Um, but that Ellen, the character in the book, deviates a lot from Ellen, the person. There's
Mm-hmm.
Their personalities are similar, but obviously the real Ellen is not a Captinian.
Unfortunate. um, so I got to read a little bit of. I wasn't a beta reader, but I did get to read big chunks of the first draft of the book. Would you say that uh, would you say that you settled into a rhythm after a point? Like, do you when you write, do you tend to write in fits and starts, or do you just get into a zone? You're like, I'm really in the headspace for this character, um, and should I like just keep going now, or pivot to another character because I need to write this sequentially for whatever thing I'm doing now.
I'd say that it really depended on my mood. Early on, uh, I wrote the first 40,000 words in the first 2 months, and
Hmm.
then the last 55,000 words over the next 4 months.
Hmm.
So there was definitely it definitely was there was this period up front where I wrote I think in December I wrote uh like 25,000 words that first December. And the um And while I was writing that bit, I was like really in the zone, but it started to become more and more of a challenge, especially as I needed to go back and reread to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that I was not missing things that I had already said. And the
Yeah.
longer it got, the harder it was to find in what already existed the passages that I needed, and that started to slow me down. And what I eventually
Mm-hmm.
ended up doing was I committed to writing one word every Sunday. And if one word turned into more than one word, which it invariably did, um, that that I'd be happy with at least that one word, and that I would also stream it. And the real trick was starting the streaming, because that made me focus in a way that sort of removed distractions, allowed me to sort of think through things aloud, usually to myself, but sometimes with other people. Um, but as for writing any individual character and feeling any hesitation or the need to move, I didn't really feel any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I did write most of the book straight through in order. There were no big structural changes. I stuck to my outline pretty closely. Um, some of it deviated towards the middle, which is one of the reasons why it slowed down, but it came back around. Uh, the yeah, yeah. So there was maybe I would say maybe 97% was straight through, and then I came back and added some chapters here and there.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, we had a spam message in chat I was attempting to deal with. But I find the brevity of your chapters is I feel advantageous to keeping the flow of the novel moving along. But you do, because the chapters are shorter, you tend to hop between viewpoints quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do you did you have trouble keeping focus on the larger picture because you only get um, like wedges of views into that at any given time, or do you feel like you had a pretty good handle on things like that?
I think it actually helped. Being able to see the big picture from multiple perspectives made it easier for me to sort of conceive of it as something more objective. Whereas if I was constantly writing from one perspective, it would have the more objective truth of the actual situation would have become more and more clouded by the opinions of whatever head I was currently inhabiting. Um, but also, I felt it was important to have all of these different perspectives, exactly for that same reason, that I wanted there to be a kind of objective truth that you can discover between the lines of the different characters that is never explicitly stated, but that you cotton on to along the course.
Mm-hmm. Finally figured out how to deal with that message. The other thing that I would ask is when you're hopping between characters, how do you keep track of shifting your voice to remain at that character's viewpoint
Sure.
through either through you know being mindful of that as you're writing, or whether you go back and edit a character back into the voice that they should be in, because Elodie starts speaking like Ziz for a paragraph because your mind wandered.
Sure. Uh, I think all the years of role playing have made it a lot easier for me to sort of head hop. When you're DMing, you often are doing multiple NPCs at the same time, and just the practice of doing that helps a lot. when writing.
Mhm.
But to answer that more in a process sense, there definitely were moments where I slipped and wrote in the wrong voice or from the wrong perspective or shifted tense or some issue. So the way that I generally wrote, I kind of edit as I go,
Mhm.
but that's editing. That's like immediate headspace editing. So if I'm thinking about it wrong, then I'm going to edit it wrong. So I came back around and fixed all of those things on subsequent passes through, giving it some time. So um, yeah, so like when I finished writing the whole book, I then went back through and tried to correct that and also make it better. So as I'm writing, I tend to leave out a lot of physical cues. The dialogue becomes just dialogue and not a lot of
Mhm.
what are people doing in the scene, or I'll drop a lot of uh, conversational tags. He said, they said.
Mhm.
So coming back around, if it's confusing me on second read, then I fix it there.
Gotcha. Um, so what would you say the kind of reader you're hoping to attract with this is? Like what sorts of things might this person already be into? Um, another way to ask is like, if you like X, you might like this.
Sure.
Be it a game, a movie, or other piece of media.
I think there's like a broad level I can answer that at, and then a smaller level,
Sure.
or I would say more specific level. At the broadest level, this is both a science fiction book and a fantasy book. Labeling it as science fantasy, I think, might be slightly disingenuous. It's not a Star Wars. It's not a Dune. It's really more like a mashup of hard science fiction and a harder fantasy together. So I called it hard science fantasy.
Hmm.
So if you like hard science fiction or fantasy, then you will probably like this. But if we dig into more specifics, I think uh, if I were to pick two authors that this work is most similar to, I would probably pick that are like famous authors. I would probably pick Neil Stevenson for the science fictiony side, and I would pick Brandon Sanderson for the fantasy side.
Yeah, I actually picked up on a little bit of. I had a familiar feeling too when I was reading, specifically Cryptonomicon,
Yeah,
with the way some of the, I'll say some of the character vignettes play out. Is those little moments where you're like, I get to see how this person thinks,
yeah.
and it's very interesting. So yeah, I can see that. I haven't read too much Sanderson, but it is tracking a little bit. You also, I mean, if nothing else, the fact that you sat your ass down and just cracked out 95,000 words over 6 months is very Sanderson-esque.
Uh,
The only thing you were really missing on the Magitism website is a word count tracker.
sure.
So maybe for book two, we can get that feature in.
Yeah, probably. Uh, I would definitely say that there's a lot. I'm a lot more inspired by Sanderson than just um, textually.
Hmm.
I really think he's thinking about the the business of publishing in interesting new ways, and
Hmm.
really pushing the industry, really dragging the industry screaming and yelling into
That
the modern era.
Kickstarter of his was pretty wild.
Yes, to say the
Um,
least.
yeah.
But even just the way that he even this live stream in a certain regard is inspired by the kind of live streams that he does, because he's very open about the process of writing, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, in a way that I think historically people try to put behind a curtain,
Mm-hmm.
and he's dragging it out so that everyone can see the actual work that goes into to making novels.
Awesome. So let's say someone's not a novel reader.
Yeah.
Attack it from same question from like another angle. Like, let's say I'm really into sci-fi, or I only play video games because.
Sure. So let's see. Movies. Um, there's not a lot of hard fantasy movies. There's not a lot of hard science fiction movies either. There's more than fantasy, but it's generally pretty difficult to sell audiences on those sorts of concepts. But there are examples, right? And of them, I think maybe the one that's going to be closest is going to be something like what would be a good science fiction. I think there's not really a strong horror element
Mhm.
to Magitism. I mean, you could say that Burning Flames is a bit of an eldritch horror, but
Mhm.
it's not presented. It's not presented in that way. But I would say something like the way that the story is told in Aliens versus
Mhm.
Alien is like, if you liked Aliens more than you liked Alien, I think that is probably a decent indicator that you'll enjoy the book.
Mhm.
And in a fantasy direction, I think the less traditional the fantasy, the better. So, um, even like, I wouldn't point to Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't point to the Chronicles of Narnia. I wouldn't point to Harry Potter. I would point to maybe,
Mistborn, something like that. If you've read those,
yeah,
where the I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would say something like a story where the systems that govern the world are described clearly. And you mentioned Sanderson earlier, and he tends to do that with
yeah, definitely.
his magic systems. And as far as a movie, I think the movie that I most drew parallels to, at least in the early parts of the book, is actually Ex Machina, where a human is interrogating an AI,
Yeah,
and there are a lot of parallels to that in the scenes when Ziz is interacting with Burning Flames.
I can see that.
Um,
The other
Obviously,
similar,
oh
you might even say something like Her.
yeah, something like that. We had a question directly about TV. Any TV that seems relevant?
Uh, like, there's really not a lot of hard science fiction TV, but um, like, there's a handful of shows, but I don't think any of them are. I wouldn't say that. Maybe Farscape.
Okay. I
There are
would
lots of similar elements.
I wouldn't. The theme is completely different, and I mean completely different. But I would say the best example of a hard science show that I've seen recently was actually the Chernobyl miniseries, where it's you are getting a there's a team of people that are solving a problem, and you are on the ground seeing that process from all angles. And there are a lot of aspects of Magitism, the book, that resemble that same structure. Uh, are we getting it on? Hopefully not Netflix, because they cancel everything after like the second season. And Will already said there's gonna maybe a third book, so
Mhm.
that's out the window.
I would I would love to be approached by even Netflix uh, for adaptations. I think the only sort of adaptation I'm not going to be able to do is a video game one.
Yes, I can imagine. I can only imagine why. But let's see, games. I'm pretty well versed on games. Let's see what I think of. I think anybody that is into a good. I'm gonna say anyone that's into like a good point and click adventure that has a story that you can explore. Uh, Ducky Buns recommends a Burning Flame plushie, which I think would be amazing.
I've already started looking into how to achieve that.
That is, hey, you heard it here first. Um, and I guess to kind of bring like directly talking about the book more to a close, I would say let's have the actual like elevator pitch. I work in startup land, so I think in elevator pitches. But what would you say to someone that's like, "Oh, you write. What's your book about?" And how would you
Sure.
sell them on it?
You know, I've gone through a variety of iterations on the elevator pitch. I think the first one was something like eldritch horrors coming to Earth and learning the that friendship is magic was where I started. But it's become more of a the elevator pitch has become more uh, a magical alien crash lands on Earth and has to convince humanity to help them get back home.
Yeah, and I would say thematically, obviously the hard sci-fi. There's the element of queer fiction that goes along with it, and for you to write some of the most wholesome stuff I've read in a while was probably the biggest surprise. Because, like we said, I've known you for a long time, and we have a very similar sense of humor and the way we speak about things. So it's like, wow, I actually there's a point in the book where my heart fluttered a little bit at being happy and yeah. So I guess to bring this portion of things to a close, is there anything else you would like to specifically bring up?
I think we've hit a lot. What I do want to do is thank you for doing this interview portion.
Yeah, yeah, it's I'm happy to do it. You know, I'm not going to self promote, but I
Well,
actually
now's the
do.
time. Go ahead.
Oh well, okay. I actually run a website called Co-Optimist. It's about cooperative video games, and we do weekly streams. And uh, it's at this point, it's just a bunch of old men playing games together and having fun with what's new and cool. But it's given me the perspective of being able to actually interview people because I had to do it quite a bit. And oh, thank you, Ducky. Uh, you're awesome too. And we will bond over our Burning Flames plushie as soon as they're available.
See what I can do.
All right. So I think that's like the first bit of structured content
Yes.
we have for this.
Depending on how things go, maybe the only bit of structured content.
And you know what? When you say you're going to stream for 24 hours, I don't care what you plan. It's going to get turned on its head the moment the sleep madness sets in.
Well, you've done these before. What do I have to expect? What am I
What
looking
do you
forward
have
to?
to expect? You're gonna hit a wall probably around hour 16.
Mm,
Uh, and even if you'd been taking liberal breaks and hydrating and making sure that you're eating, you are going to like your body's gonna want to quit on you, and you're gonna look at that clock and you're gonna say, "Holy shit, I've got 8 more hours to go or whatever." Man, I need to dig in.
hmm
I
hmm
really need to dig in. But it sounds like we're gonna, Will's gonna kind of do the Will Brawl variety hour.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've got a bunch of games we can play. Uh, I can teach Mike Door Fortress. Um,
that that that
I can do a quick sales check and see where we're at, if anywhere. Uh, the answer
well,
is Amazon
I
isn't
bought a
giving me
copy
data.
of it.
So
So
sorry, what was that?
I said I bought a copy,
Mm,
so
well, thank
you
you.
have at least one sale.
I apparently have at least four sales. So
Excellent.
we'll see how that progresses.
Yeah, the
I don't know how late you're wanting to go, Mike. We could jump into Door Fortress if you wanted.
I can get well. I As we discussed, I will probably dip out in about an hour and a half, so I can attempt to sleep. I am a certified insomniac,
Mm,
so falling asleep for me takes a while, um, even with the relevant aids. But I will sleep for several hours and then be back in the morning, should you need me.
yes, and I
Uh,
will. I'm sure I will be just as sane as I am now. Uh,
oh well, you know how it goes.
well, you know better than I do. But
Yeah.
yeah, let me swap over to the splash mode so I can switch. So I can switch to the game mode. Words. Um, all right.
Signing off for the night. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. All right. Let's turn on the Door Fortress. And then I can move OBS up here.